The first time I saw the sheriff's SUV rolling toward our subdivision, I honestly thought someone else was having a bad day. I had no idea he was coming because of me. By sunset, the HOA president would be standing in the middle of my ranch entrance with her face completely drained of color, 3 deputies blocking the road, county officials unfolding old survey maps across the hood of a patrol truck, and 40 angry homeowners realizing they had been lied to for years. The HOA thought they controlled everything beyond their stone entrance. They never imagined the sheriff would arrive carrying a court order with my family's name written across the top. And they definitely didn't expect him to tell the HOA president the 7 words that changed everything. Step away from this man's property immediately. Everything became silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. But none of this started that afternoon. It started 6 months earlier, with a rusty wooden gate that should have never been touched. I'm 43 years old and I own a 200-acre cattle ranch just outside a growing Texas town. My grandfather bought the land in 1958, long before luxury homes gated communities and homeowners associations began spreading across the county. Back then there were only gravel roads, open fields, and neighbors who settled disagreements over coffee instead of lawyers. The ranch had stayed in our family through droughts, floods, cattle diseases, and recessions. We never sold a single acre. When my father passed away, I inherited everything: the red barn, the cattle, the old farmhouse, the oak trees planted by my grandfather, even the weathered wooden entrance gate that leaned slightly to the left because an impatient bull had rammed it 15 years earlier. Nothing fancy. Nothing worth millions to anyone except developers. Unfortunately, developers saw something different. Our county exploded with growth. Empty fields became neighborhoods almost overnight. Within 3 years, a luxury subdivision called Cedar Ridge Estates surrounded 2 sides of my ranch: huge brick homes, perfect green lawns, decorative fountains, private security, and of course an HOA. At first we stayed out of each other's way. Their residents waved when they drove past. I waved back while fixing fences or feeding cattle. Life seemed peaceful. Until Karen Mitchell became a president. Karen was in her early 50s, always dressed like she was attending a business meeting even on Saturday mornings. Perfect blonde hair, expensive sunglasses, spotless white pants, and shoes that had clearly never touched real dirt. She smiled constantly, but it never reached her eyes. The first conversation we had lasted less than 2 minutes. "I think your fence needs replacing," she said without introducing herself. I looked behind me. "My fence? Yes, it's on my property. I understand, but homeowners can see it." I laughed. "I guess they'll have to keep seeing it." Her smile disappeared. "Property values matter. So does ownership." She turned around without another word. I figured that would be the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. The complaints started arriving 2 weeks later. Certified letters, emails, notices taped to my entrance gate. Each one claimed my ranch violated Cedar Ridge community standards. Paint your barn, replace fencing, remove old farm equipment, hide livestock feeding areas, control odors, plant decorative trees. Every notice ended with the same sentence: failure to comply may result in fines. I ignored every single one, not because I wanted to fight, because I wasn't a member of their HOA. I had never signed their agreement. Their rules meant absolutely nothing on my land. I even mailed a polite letter explaining exactly that. I thought facts would solve the problem. Instead, they made Karen angry. A month later, I woke up to construction noise: bulldozers, dump trucks, concrete mixers. They were widening the subdivision road. Normally that wouldn't concern me, except they had parked equipment directly in front of my ranch gate. I couldn't get my livestock trailer out. Workers shrugged. We were told this area belongs to the HOA. It doesn't. Our supervisor said it does. I called the county. By afternoon, an inspector arrived. He checked maps, measured property markers, then told the construction crew to move every machine immediately. The supervisor apologized. Karen never did. Instead, she began attending every county planning meeting she could. I later learned why. Developers wanted permission to build another phase behind my ranch. The easiest access crossed a strip of my land, just 20 feet wide. To most people, it looked insignificant. To engineers, it was worth millions. Without it, traffic had to use a much longer route. The county denied their request because I refused to sell. That decision turned me from an inconvenience into an obstacle. The anonymous complaints became personal. Someone called animal control claiming I neglected my cattle. The officer arrived expecting starving livestock. Instead, he found healthy Angus cattle grazing across fresh pasture. He laughed before leaving. Next came environmental complaints. Then accusations that I stored hazardous chemicals. Every agency found nothing. Every report was closed. Still, the complaints kept coming. Deputy Mike Torres visited one afternoon after another anonymous call. He climbed out of his patrol SUV smiling. "Ethan, let me guess. Another complaint?" He nodded. "They said you were threatening residents with a rifle." I pointed toward the tractor I had been repairing. "I've been replacing hydraulic hoses all morning." I figured. He looked around. "No rifle, no residents, no threats." He shook his head. "Someone really wants your attention? I think I know who." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 3 weeks later, things escalated. I drove to town before sunrise to buy fencing supplies. When I returned, my entrance gate wouldn't open. Someone had wrapped heavy steel chain around both posts. A brand new padlock hung in the center. Bolted to the gate was a bright notice: Pires SECVZ Personal Y. I stared at it for almost a full minute. Then I laughed because it was too ridiculous to believe. Someone had locked me out of my own ranch. My truck sat outside. My cattle were inside. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Torres arrived first. He examined the lock. Did you put this here? No. You know who did? I have a pretty good guess. He photographed everything before cutting the chain with bolt cutters from his patrol vehicle. The moment the chain hit the ground, another SUV pulled up. Karen climbed out. What are you doing? She demanded. Deputy Torres looked at her calmly, removing an illegal obstruction.
That's how a property, no, I answered.
It absolutely is. Torres folded his arms. Mom, do you have documentation proving ownership? It's community access. That wasn't my question. Karen hesitated. We're still gathering paperwork. Torres looked directly at me. Walker. I opened my truck and handed him copies of my recorded deed and county survey that I always kept in a waterproof folder. He read them quietly, then handed them back. Everything shows this gate belongs to Mr. Walker. Karen crossed her arms. Those records are outdated. Torres smiled politely. If you have newer county records, I'd be happy to review them. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed toward the subdivision. You'll be hearing from our attorney. She drove away, throwing gravel across the road. Deputy Torres watched her leave. I don't think this is over. Neither did I. But I never imagined that someone inside the HOA had already started putting together a plan that would bring the county courthouse, licensed surveyors, attorneys, and eventually the sheriff himself straight to my front gate. And by the time I learned what they had done behind closed doors, they believed it was already too late for me to stop them. For almost 2 weeks after the gate incident, everything became strangely quiet. No letters. No anonymous complaints. No county inspectors. No deputies stopping by because of another ridiculous accusation. That silence should have made me relax. Instead, it made me nervous. People like Karen Mitchell didn't simply give up. They regrouped. I found out exactly what she had been doing when my neighbor, Tom Henderson, drove his old pickup down my gravel road one Friday evening. Tom owned the ranch bordering my western fence. We'd known each other for over 20 years. He climbed out of his truck looking uneasy. Ethan, he said quietly, you need to hear something. What happened? My wife attended Cedar Ridge's neighborhood barbecue yesterday. I leaned against my fence. And they're telling everyone your ranch road has always been a shared community access road. I frowned. That's impossible, I know. They've got maps hanging in the clubhouse. What kind of maps? I don't know. Copies, maybe. They were telling residents that the county made a mistake decades ago and that they're fixing the paperwork. I felt my stomach tighten. Who told them that? Karen. That wasn't just another neighborhood rumor. That was dangerous. If enough people believed it, they would begin treating my property like it belonged to the HOA. The following Monday proved exactly that. I was repairing fencing near the southern pasture when I heard engines coming down my private ranch road. Not one vehicle, 3 SUV, a landscaping truck, and a trailer carrying expensive decorative trees. I drove over in my utility vehicle and parked across the road. The workers climbed out. Morning, one of them said. You can't come in. Our work order says this is phase 3 entrance. It isn't. He handed me a clipboard. The work order listed my ranch address. Customer at Cedar Ridge Estates, OA. Project Landscape Community Entrance Extension. I stared at the paper. Who hired you? The HOA. They hired you to landscape my property. The foreman looked confused. They said they own it. I pointed toward the old iron survey markers sticking out of the ground. You see that? He nodded. That's my property line. His face changed immediately. I think we'd better make a phone call. Within 20 minutes, Karen arrived, followed by 2 OA board members wearing matching blue polo shirts embroidered with the Cedar Ridge logo. One of them, Richard Collins, carried a thick folder under his arm. Karen stepped toward me like she was walking into a business presentation. Mr. Walker. Karen, we've confirmed ownership. No, you haven't. Richard opened the folder and pulled out a glossy site plan. This subdivision expansion includes this access corridor. I barely looked at it. A developer's drawing isn't a deed. Karen smiled confidently. Our attorney disagrees. Your attorney wasn't alive when my grandfather bought this ranch. One of the workers quietly started loading trees back onto the trailer. He wanted no part of what was happening. Karen noticed. The foreman shook his head. Not until ownership is settled. She looked furious. You were hired. We were hired to work on legal property. He climbed into his truck. We're leaving. Karen's expression hardened as the trucks drove away. This isn't over. It never is with you? She turned without answering. For the first time, I saw uncertainty behind her confidence. She believed something. I just didn't know what. 3 days later, I found out. A certified envelope arrived from a law firm downtown. Inside was a demand letter. According to the HOA's attorney, my ranch entrance sat on what they called common development property. The letter demanded I remove my gate within 10 days. It also warned that failure to comply could result in legal action, construction costs, and damages exceeding $250,000. I read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was completely detached from reality. I drove straight to the county records office. Linda Garcia, who had worked there for nearly 30 years, greeted me with a smile. Ethan, I need every document tied to my ranch. She raised an eyebrow. Everything. For nearly 2 hours, we searched through digital records and old archive books, original deeds, tax records, boundary surveys, road easements, utility maps. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. My entrance road had belonged exclusively to my family since 1958. No public easement, no shared access, no HOA rights. Linda looked puzzled. So why are they claiming ownership? I wish I knew. She hesitated. Actually, what? There was a records request last month. Or from who? She couldn't legally tell me, but she didn't need to. The person asked specifically about your entrance road. I already knew. Karen. Someone had been digging through county history trying to find anything they could use. They hadn't found it. So maybe they decided to create it. That possibility became much more real a week later. I was feeding cattle when my phone rang. Deputy Mike Torres. Ethan, everything okay? I think you should come home. I am home. No, come to your front gate. His voice sounded unusually serious. I drove over immediately. 2 county survey stakes had appeared beside my road. Bright orange flags marked fresh paint lines across the gravel. A private engineering company had set up equipment. A man wearing a reflective vest introduced himself. We're surveying the future roadway. There isn't going to be a future roadway. Our client says otherwise. Who's your client? Cedar Ridge Estates HOA. I asked the question that mattered. Did the county authorize the survey? The surveyor stopped writing. No. Did I authorize it? No. So why are you standing on my land? His face changed. We were told this property dispute was already resolved. It isn't. Deputy Torres walked over carrying a folded document. This might interest you. It was a temporary construction permit application. Applicant Cedar Ridge Estates. Purpose, community access improvement. Status pending. Not approved. Pending. Karen wasn't waiting for permission. She was acting like approval had already happened. The engineering crew packed their equipment within minutes. The lead surveyor apologized before leaving. I think we were missiled. I think you were. As they drove away, Deputy Torres looked toward the subdivision. They're getting more aggressive. I noticed. You need an attorney? I was hoping it wouldn't come to that. It already has. The next morning I met with attorney Daniel Brooks. He was calm, methodical, and the kind of lawyer who listened more than he talked. He spread every deed, survey, tax record, and letter across his conference table. After almost an hour, he leaned back. I have good news. I could use some. Legally, your ownership appears extremely strong. And the bad news? They're betting you won't fight. They've misjudged me. He smiled slightly. I suspected that. Daniel immediately sent the HOA a formal cease and desist letter demanding they stop entering my property, stop making false ownership claims, and preserve every email and meeting record related to my ranch. Their response arrived 4 days later. They refused everything. Instead, they attached something none of us expected, a photocopy of an old survey from 1979. According to that document, my entrance road supposedly shifted 20 feet east decades ago. If true, the AOA's claim suddenly looked much stronger. Daniel studied it silently. Finally, he spoke. This document bothers me. Why? The signature? What about it? The county surveyor whose name appears here retired in 1974. I stared at him. This survey is dated 1979. Exactly. A chill ran through the room. Daniel picked up his phone. I know someone at the county. Within hours we had confirmation. No official record of that survey existed. No filing number. No archive copy. Nothing. It was as if the document had appeared out of thin air. Daniel looked directly at me. If someone created this, they committed fraud. They committed several felonies. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift. Karen hadn't just crossed a property line. She may have crossed a criminal one. But before we could expose the truth, the HOA made the boldest move yet. Early Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery. I grabbed my boots and rushed outside. At the front of my ranch, 2 bulldozers, a dump truck, and nearly a dozen contractors had already begun tearing up my gravel entrance road. Fresh concrete barriers blocked both ends. A large sign stood beside the equipment. Future entrance Cedar Ridge Estates Phase 3. And standing in the middle of my property with a satisfied smile was Karen Mitchell. She looked at me as if the fight were already over. You should have accepted our offer. Ethan. I looked past her at the workers ripping apart the road my grandfather had built with his own hands. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and made one call. Not to my lawyer, not to the county, directly to the sheriff, because something told me that by the time law enforcement arrived, this wasn't going to be a civil disagreement anymore. The dispatcher answered before the second ring. County Sheriff's Office. What's your emergency? My name is Ethan Walker. Contractors are actively destroying my private ranch entrance. They're claiming OA ownership of my land. My attorney believes they've submitted forged survey documents, and they're refusing to leave. The dispatcher became noticeably more serious. Are there any weapons involved? No. Is anyone threatening violence? Not yet. Stay where you are. Deputies are on the way. I ended the call and started recording everything with my phone. The bulldozers continued scraping away gravel my grandfather had laid decades earlier. Contractors looked uncomfortable. Most of them avoided eye contact with me. One younger operator finally shut off his machine. He climbed down and quietly asked, "Sir, are you saying this really is your property? It has been for almost 70 years. He looked toward Karen. She told us all permits were approved. They weren't. His shoulders dropped. I was afraid of that. Within minutes, several workers stopped their equipment. Nobody wanted to be responsible for destroying private property if ownership was in question. Karen noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" she shouted. One foreman answered, "Until law enforcement sorts this out, we're done. You'll finish the job you're being paid for." "No, ma'am. Not if it puts my company at risk." Karen's face turned bright red. "I'll sue every one of you." The foreman folded his arms. "You'll have to get in line." Just then, the sound of sirens echoed across the pasture. One patrol SUV became 2, then 3. Behind them came another county vehicle, and finally a black SUV with gold lettering on the side, Sheriff David Reynolds. The moment his vehicle stopped, the entire construction site went silent. Sheriff Reynolds stepped out slowly, adjusting his tan campaign hat. He wasn't a man who raised his voice often, but everyone in the county knew that when he spoke, People listened. He walked directly toward me. First, Mr. Walker. Yeah, sir, you made the call. I did. He nodded once. My office has also received information from the county attorney. That caught Karen's attention. She hurried over with a folder under her arm. Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. This man is interfering with our approved construction. Sheriff Reynolds didn't even look at her. Instead, he asked me, do you have your deed? I handed him the waterproof folder that had practically become part of my truck. He flipped through the documents calmly. Then the county attorney's investigator arrived carrying another stack of files. Behind him came county surveyor Michael Alvarez. Michael was nearing 60 with decades of experience. He looked at Karen only briefly before walking straight to the old iron survey marker beside my road. He brushed dirt away with his boot. Then he smiled. It never moved. Karen interrupted. That marker is wrong, and Michael looked back at her. I installed this marker myself in 1992. The silence that followed was almost painful. Karen blinked. You what? I supervised the boundary verification after a flood. It's exactly where it has always been. He took out professional GPS equipment and began measuring. His assistants followed behind him, placing new reference points. Every measurement matched Ethan's recorded deed. Exactly. Within 45 minutes, there was no longer any professional disagreement. The road belonged to me entirely. Sheriff Reynolds finally turned toward Karen. She immediately interrupted. Our attorney has documents. He raised one hand. She stopped talking. Then he spoke the words I would remember for the rest of my life. Step away from this man's property immediately. Nobody moved. The sheriff continued. This construction stops now. Karen pointed toward her folder. Those surveys prove. County Surveyor Alvarez reached for the photocopy Daniel Brooks had questioned days earlier. He studied it for only a few seconds. Then his eyebrows lifted. I've never seen this document before. Karen's confidence faded. It's in our records. New. He tapped the signature. This signature belongs to Harold Benson. Wes. Michael looked directly at the sheriff. Harold Benson died 2 years before this survey was supposedly prepared. Every contractor within earshot slowly turned toward Karen. Sheriff Reynolds asked one question. Where did this survey come from? Karen hesitated. Our attorney provided it. The sheriff looked toward Daniel Brooks, who had just arrived carrying another folder. Daniel calmly handed over certified copies from the county archives. There is no record of this survey ever being filed. The sheriff's expression hardened. Then another county employee hurried from his vehicle carrying printed emails obtained through a subpoena issued only that morning. Daniel had moved faster than I realized. One email caught everyone's attention. It had been sent from Karen to another board member 3 weeks earlier. If the original survey can't be found, we'll use the replacement copy until everything is finalized. Another replied, no one checks old records anyway. The sheriff slowly lowered the papers. Did either of you create or alter county property records? Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. One HOA board member, Richard Collins, suddenly spoke. I told her we shouldn't do this. Karen whipped around. Richard, you said everyone would believe it. I never? You told us Ethan would settle instead of hiring lawyers. Another board member quietly stepped backward. Then another. Within seconds, Karen was standing alone. Sheriff Reynolds nodded toward 2 deputies. Detain Ms. Mitchell while we investigate possible evidence tampering and fraudulent filing. The deputies approached. Karen finally panicked. This is a misunderstanding. One deputy replied calmly, please place your hands behind your back. Residents from Cedar Ridge had begun gathering near the entrance. Word had spread quickly. Dozens watched in stunned silence as the woman who had promised to protect property values was escorted toward a patrol vehicle. Several homeowners looked confused, others looked angry. One elderly resident approached me, mid-street.
Walker? Yes.
Did she really lie to all of us? I simply handed him a certified copy of my deed. He read it quietly, then shook his head. We paid HOA dues to build that entrance. I'm sorry. No, he looked toward Karen. She's the one who should be sorry. The legal battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. Over the following months, investigators uncovered far more than anyone expected. Board meeting minutes had been edited. Emails had been deleted. Contractors had received false statements claiming county approval. Applications had been submitted with altered property descriptions. Even worse, HOA funds had been spent on engineering studies for land they never owned. The district attorney filed multiple charges related to document fraud, attempted theft by deception, misuse of association funds, and filing false public records. Karen resigned before the criminal case reached trial. Several board members accepted civil settlements after admitting they relied entirely on her representations. The AOA's insurance company refused to cover intentional misconduct. Homeowners were furious. Many filed their own lawsuits against the former board for wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars in community money. Meanwhile, my civil case moved quickly. The judge reviewed the evidence, including certified deeds, historical surveys, GPS measurements, contractor testimony, and county records. It took less than an hour for the court to rule. The HOA had no ownership interest whatsoever in my ranch entrance. The judge ordered them to pay for complete restoration of my rod, replace every damaged fence section, reimburse all legal expenses, compensate me for lost ranch operations during construction delays, permanently cease entering my property without written permission. When the final amount was announced, the courtroom became completely silent. The judgment exceeded $1.8 million after damages, attorney's fees, restoration costs, and statutory penalties. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Someone asked if I planned to celebrate. I smiled. They looked surprised. That's it, I've already won. A few weeks later, crews returned to my ranch. Not to steal it, to rebuild it. They restored my grandfather's gravel road exactly as it had been. The weathered wooden gate was repaired instead of replaced. I refused to install anything modern. That old gate had survived floods, storms, cattle, and now one dishonest OA. It deserved to stay. One afternoon, Sheriff Reynolds stopped by while I was repairing fence wire. He leaned against his SUV and looked toward the pasture. Looks peaceful again. That does. In 30 years of law enforcement. He smiled. I've never seen an HO president talk herself into a criminal investigation. I don't think she expected you to show up, he laughed. Neither did she. We stood there quietly for a moment, watching my Angus cattle graze beneath the Texas sun. The subdivision still existed beyond the fence. Families still lived there. Children still rode bicycles along the sidewalks. Most of them had never wanted a fight. They simply trusted the wrong people. Over time, many of those neighbors became friends. Some even apologized for believing the rumors. I accepted every apology. Holding on to anger would only let Karen keep taking something from me. The ranch had belonged to my grandfather, then my father. Now it belonged to me. One day, if I'm lucky, it'll belong to my children. Because land isn't just dirt. It's history. It's responsibility. It's the promise that some things aren't for sale simply because someone with power decides they want them. Every morning, I still unlock that same weathered wooden gate before the sun rises. Its hinges still creak exactly the way they did when my grandfather pushed it open decades ago. And every single time I hear that familiar sound, I'm reminded of one simple truth. Property can be challenged, lies can spread, but sooner or later the truth always finds its way down the road, even if it arrives wearing a sheriff's badge.